Okay, this short tutorial will introduce you to working with the timeline in Photoshop. So, if you're creating an animation, you want to start by going to File, New, and you want to go to Film and Video and choose 1920 by 1080. And go ahead and create that. I've already done that, so I'm just going to close this window. So what I've done here is I've set up, and there are a few ways of doing this, but I think the easiest way is to set up your animation, draw it on a series of frames. As you can see, I spend a whole lot of time on the visuals for these tutorials, but I did a little bit of drawing on 8 frames, and notice that I numbered the frames. Or the layers, excuse me. That's very important when working with the timeline in Photoshop because it's super easy to get confused. It's not ideal for working really with anything over, I would say, 20 frames. If you set yourself up by numbering them, you'll just be so much better off when you go to make the animation. So I've got a background here. The background's white. The background's really just so I can see. I could get rid of that and it will still, when I'm done with my animation, it will still render that white background. So to make my animation, I'm going to go to Window and I'm going to go to Timeline. And when you open this up, I've already done this on this file, but when you open this up, it'll probably open up a window that says, has a little button in the middle that says either frame animation or video animation. And for this, I have chosen to work with the frame animation option. The video, you can switch back and forth. So the video option looks like this. This is much closer to working in After Effects. So if you've worked in After Effects, this will probably look pretty familiar. But for this one, I'm going to stay with the frame animation. And once you've set this up, and you've got your layers all set with your different actions for each layer, you can come in and you can just say make frames from layers. And what that does, it's going to set this up. Oh, I had all my layers off. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Oh, I see. It brought the first one in and set it to 5 seconds. So I can either say no delay, or that's just my white layer. There's nothing on there, so I'm just going to delete it. And then if I pull this down and I play it now, you can see, I'm going to let it play forever. So there's my animation. It's happening really fast. So I can come in and I can choose to slow it down. Of course, you can play with these settings. I'm going to just set them all the same except for the last one. And I'm going to let that one be a little bit longer. And now if I play it, you can see it's a little more manageable. So the important thing here is if you start changing the layers or moving them around, you can get all kinds of funky weirdness happening in your timeline. So it really is far better if you set your layers up ahead of time, how you want them to look, and then create the timeline. So now that I'm done with this, I need to get it out of Photoshop. So I'm just going to go to Export, and I'm going to go to Render Video. And this brings up a window that looks like this. And in here, you can see we've got our Adobe Media Encoder, and the format is H.264 by default. I could change this, but the H.264 will give you an MP4, and that's a pretty good file format, pretty small file size, so I'm going to leave it there. We could also, instead of that, we could go to the image sequence, and we could export this as a series of JPEGs or PNGs or even Photoshop files or even TIFFs if we wanted to print them for some reason. You can go into settings and choose the quality, and that can be very, very helpful if you're working between Photoshop and another program. And so I'm just going to change this. I'm going to call it demo. All right, and I'm just going to leave it on H.264, and I'm just going to hit render. And then I can go, and here's my demo. Actually, it brought in a black background, so okay, that's interesting. Didn't want it to do that. So what I'm going to do is, there's probably a setting I just missed, but I'm just going to come in here. It's kind of a good mistake to make. And I'm just going to, in fact, probably what I did is I turned on transparency for the export. But I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to turn the background on for each layer. So in effect, what you're doing is you're turning layers on and off for each frame to make each frame look like what you want it to look like. And if I play this now, there it goes. So let's try exporting again. I'm just going to overwrite the other file. Okay, put it on the desktop, say render. Yep. And then let's go to my desktop. And here it is. Yay. So you could conceivably do an entire animation in Photoshop. As I mentioned, it's really not good for very long or complicated animations, but what it is good for is a much more intuitive and really just better drawing tool than Animate. So when I'm working on animation, I am constantly going back and forth to whatever program will do the job for me. So those of you who enjoy working in Photoshop, you can certainly use this for part of your animation, but probably not all of it. And I'll probably talk about that in some other tutorials, but that's it for this one.